They're going to win. They're going to win big. And a defeat in that building behind me, the Royal Courts of Justice, will cost Harry millions. Millions that he hasn't got. If Harry loses, which the Mail think he will, it will further damage his reputation. It will erode any remaining credibility that he may have, and it will clean him out financially, which, be clear, will place further pressure on that crumbling marriage.
The case has now officially reached its final stage, and the pressure is at an all-time high. Every detail has been laid out, every argument pulled apart, and now everything rests in the hands of the judge, Mr. Justice Nicken, as he prepares to make his decision. He's even using the Easter period to focus fully on this, which says a lot about how complex this situation really is. After 11 intense weeks, what's left is a mix of claims, emotions, and contradictions that kept people locked in from start to finish. This was never a simple or clean case. It came with twists that nobody saw coming, confusing moments that left people questioning everything, and shifting versions of events that made it difficult to track what was really going on. There were messages that raised serious concerns, a key witness stepping away from earlier statements, and a royal editor pushing back hard, saying parts of the story didn't line up at all. On top of that, the courtroom itself saw emotional moments, visible tension, and clear signs that the pressure was hitting everyone involved. At one point, a former Daily Mail editor even admitted the process pushed him to his limit during long, exhausting nights. That alone shows how intense things became behind the scenes. This wasn't a calm legal process. It felt like constant pressure building at every step, with each new detail adding more weight to the situation. Behind the scenes, there are now quiet reports that the Daily Mail's legal team is feeling confident about where this could end up. Nothing is certain, but that confidence is being described as steady and growing.
H, in case you were confused by the name and the picture. And he puts a big kiss on it. Of course, he had a false name and a false picture because he's so incredibly famous.
And if that feeling lines up with the final ruling, the impact for Harry could be serious, especially when it comes to finances. The potential costs being discussed are no small matter. Legal fees and possible damages could quickly build into something extremely heavy. Cases like this don't just end with a decision, they often come with financial consequences that can change everything fast. But it's not just about money. The impact on reputation could be just as strong, maybe even stronger. If the final decision raises doubts about how reliable certain claims were, or suggests that parts of the case weren't as solid as they seemed, that would bring major pressure onto his public image. It could mark one of the toughest moments he's faced since stepping into a more independent spotlight. And there's a bigger picture here that can't be ignored. This case ties into a narrative that's been building for years. If the outcome doesn't go his way, especially with details like the Charlotte Griffith messages and the Gavin Burrows situation already being discussed, it could shake that entire narrative in a serious way. That's exactly why so many people are watching this so closely. Looking at one of the key moments, the Charlotte Griffith situation stands out immediately. Harry explained that he met her once, realized she was a journalist shortly after, mentioned it to a friend, and then moved on. That was the version clearly presented in court. But as everything came under deeper review, that moment started getting a lot more attention. According to his version, there was no ongoing contact after that first meeting. However, messages that later surfaced suggest something very different. Those messages point to continued communication over several months, and not just basic exchanges either. The tone appeared friendly, warm, and at times even playful. There were references to watching movies, sharing jokes, and even using nicknames. That kind of interaction added a completely new layer.
There's now a very real possibility that Harry is going to lose this case because he's made a claim about Charlotte Griffiths and the nature of their friendship, and then the messages tell a different story.
To how close the connection might have actually been. It went further than that. There were mentions of social gatherings and moments where Harry shared his phone number himself. That detail raised even more questions about how the interaction developed over time. Once those messages became part of the case, it shifted how people viewed that entire situation. One detail that really caught attention involved a message about making polite conversation at a dinner while asking guests for charity donations. When that detail was compared with official records, it appeared to line up with a specific event, a Centerpoint dinner held at Clarence House in December 2011. That connection made the timeline feel much more solid and harder to dismiss. Then Griffith's own testimony added even more weight. She explained that through her social connections, she became aware that Princess Catherine was expecting her first child days before it became public. That kind of information would normally be huge for any journalist. But instead of publishing it, she chose to hold back. She made a clear decision to separate her professional work from her private relationships. That choice stood out in a case filled with conflicting claims. It showed restraint and a strong sense of boundaries, which made people look at her credibility in a different light. At the same time, Harry's legal team reportedly challenged that point. They suggested the story about Catherine's pregnancy may have been presented in a way that didn't fully reflect the situation. That's a serious claim, especially when it involves an experienced journalist. Griffith pushed back firmly against that idea, and if the judge ultimately views her account as credible, that alone could weaken a key part of Harry's argument. That's how critical moments like this become in a case like this. Then there's the situation involving Gavin Burrows, which may have created an even bigger shift. He was introduced as a key witness, expected to support claims about how certain information had been obtained.
2011, after a party with Charlotte Griffiths, Harry claims that he cut off all contact with her when he discovered that she was a journalist.
His role was meant to strengthen a major part of the case, but things took a sharp turn in court. Burrows stated that the statement presented under his name didn't match what he recognized. He made it clear he had no involvement in creating it, questioned the signature, and said it didn't reflect his own words. He also explained that he only became aware of this statement later through media coverage. That raised serious questions about how that document ended up being used in the case. Moments like that carry huge weight in a legal setting. When a key witness distances themselves from major evidence, it doesn't just create doubt. It can shake the entire structure of that argument. And in this case, where that testimony was supposed to support a major claim, the impact could be massive depending on how the judge decides to view it. Now, everything comes down to how these details are weighed, and that's where things get real serious. The judge is working with the balance of probabilities, meaning he has to decide what seems more likely based on everything shown in court. But that's not easy at all, because it still requires a strong and consistent story across all 14 articles being challenged. And right now, that consistency is being questioned from multiple angles. On the other side, the Daily Mail has stayed locked into one clear position the entire time. Their argument is simple but strong. They say the information came from legitimate sources, specifically people within Harry's own circle. According to them, nothing came from improper methods, nothing crossed any lines, and everything was gathered in a way that follows standard practice. If the judge accepts that explanation, then the claim that information was obtained in the wrong way starts to fall apart fast. That's why this decision carries so much weight, because it doesn't just close the case. It could completely reshape how the whole situation is seen going forward.
Drinking too much. Does he drink too much? I mean, I will say that I think Harry's very out of shape. If I look at him now, I wonder about his lifestyle.
Then things took another turn when testimony from respected figures like Rebecca English added even more intensity to an already packed case. With so many contradictions, emotional exchanges, and serious consequences on the line, everything now depends on how the judge connects all these pieces together. Rebecca English suddenly found herself right in the middle of one of the biggest claims in the entire case, and the pressure around that moment was heavy. She was accused of getting information about Harry's past relationship with Chelsea Davy through questionable behavior, including a claim that someone was placed near Chelsea on a flight to listen in on private conversations. That's a massive accusation, and she did not stay quiet. She pushed back immediately and strongly, making it clear that the claim was completely false and deeply offensive. She stressed that there was no truth to it at all, and made it clear she would never even consider doing something like that at any point in her career. Her response was direct, firm, and left no space for confusion about where she stood. She also highlighted a major issue with the evidence being used. An email had been brought forward as part of the claim, but according to her, it didn't prove anything at all. There was no reply, no follow-up, no clear connection tying her to it. She even stated she had never seen that message before, which instantly raised questions about how reliable that piece of evidence really was. Then the spotlight shifted again when Paul Dacre stepped in, and his testimony brought a whole different kind of energy into the courtroom. This is someone with decades of experience, known for speaking his mind, and he made that clear from the start. He described the claims as serious, but also, at times, completely unreasonable. He didn't hide his emotions either. He admitted the situation left him shocked And during long, late nights, it pushed him into visible frustration. That kind of reaction showed just how much pressure was building behind the scenes.
Be the world's least happy millionaire, and it's rubbed off on him, and now he's furious and bitter and hates the world. Poor old David Sherborne's going to need a detox after 10 weeks with the H-bomb, isn't he?
His defense of his team was strong, emotional, and impossible to ignore. On the other side, Harry presented a very different version of events. He described the situation as something that followed him for years, creating a constant feeling that his private life was being watched, tracked, and turned into headlines. According to him, that pressure didn't just stay on the surface. It affected his personal relationships and made him question who he could really trust. His testimony carried strong emotion throughout. There were moments where he seemed overwhelmed, close to tears, and other moments where the tension in the room became impossible to ignore. At one point, things got intense enough that the judge had to step in and remind him to stay focused on answering the questions instead of turning it into a back-and-forth exchange. Moments like that don't decide a case on their own, but they definitely stand out. When a judge steps in like that, it becomes part of the overall impression being built during the trial. And those impressions can matter when everything is being carefully weighed. And then there's the contrast that kept coming up again and again throughout the case. Harry's argument focuses on the idea that his private life was exposed in ways that crossed a line. But at the same time, he has openly shared personal details through books, interviews, and major media projects that reach people all over the world. That contrast doesn't cancel his position, but it does make things more complicated. It shows that while someone can choose what to share, there's still an expectation of privacy in other areas. From a public perspective, though, it creates a more layered situation that adds pressure to how everything is being judged. Now everything is moving toward that final decision, and this next stage is slow, detailed, and extremely important. The judge will go through each of the 14 articles one by one, reviewing the evidence carefully.
It's in the book. Es ist im Buch, man kann es lesen. Dahin. Es ist drin. Im Buch. Auf die Treppe, schnell!
And deciding what is more likely to be accurate. This isn't a simple yes or no outcome. It's a step-by-step breakdown. Each article will be examined separately, and only after all of them are reviewed will the full picture come together. That's what makes this moment so critical, because even small details could influence the final outcome in a big way. One of the biggest factors in all of this is credibility. The situation involving Charlotte Griffith, the issues surrounding Gavin Burrows, and Harry's own testimony all play into that. These are the moments that the judge will weigh carefully, whether directly mentioned or reflected in the final reasoning. Right now, the Daily Mail appears steady and confident in its position, while Harry is left waiting for the outcome as the pressure builds. Meanwhile, the judge is taking his time, going through everything carefully over the holiday period to make sure no detail is missed. No matter how this ends, these 11 weeks have already left a strong mark. The case brought forward messages, testimony, disagreements, and intense moments that are now part of the public record. It wasn't just one moment that defined everything. It was the buildup of every single detail that unfolded inside that courtroom. Statements were challenged from every direction. Details didn't always line up. And at one point, even a key piece of testimony was questioned by the very person it was linked to. The courtroom saw emotional exchanges, strong reactions, and moments where the judge had to step in just to keep things on track. That kind of tension doesn't just fade, it builds pressure with every passing day. Now the final decision is getting closer, and when it drops, it won't just settle the case, it will shape how this entire situation is seen going forward. The bigger question is whether this legal battle actually achieved what it set out to do, and that answer will come straight from the judgment itself.
And the whole thing goes nuts. And it's interesting because talking about going nuts, Harry lost control to such an extent where he's not just blabbing on the verge of tears about.
To really understand what's happening here, you have to look at the legal structure behind it, because once you see that clearly, everything starts to connect. This isn't a criminal case, it's a civil one, and it focuses on something called misuse of private information. That means the judge isn't deciding guilt or innocence, but instead looking at whether certain boundaries were crossed. The whole framework comes from legal developments in the UK after the Human Rights Act of 1998, and it's built around balancing two key rights that both matter a lot. On one side, there's the right to privacy. On the other side, there's freedom of expression. Both are important, and the court has to decide exactly where the line sits in this specific situation, which is not an easy call at all. For a claim like this to succeed, Two major things need to be proven. First, the information has to actually be private, meaning a normal person would expect it to stay out of the public eye. And second, it has to be shown that the information was obtained through methods that cross the line, not through normal journalistic practices. On the first part, there is clearly some ground to stand on, and that side of the argument feels solid. Personal relationships, private conversations, and specific movements are things most people would expect to stay private. Being well-known doesn't mean every part of your life is open for public discussion, and that point still carries real weight in court. But the second part is where everything starts getting complicated, and this is where the pressure really builds. The case depends heavily on claims that certain information was gathered using methods that weren't acceptable, including things like unauthorized access or deceptive tactics. For this to work, the judge has to be convinced those methods were actually used in connection to the articles being challenged. That's exactly why the Gavin Burrows situation became such a major turning point. He was expected to support a key part of the case and help explain how information was gathered.
Why Harry doesn't like Charlotte Griffiths. It's because she drops so many truth bombs about him. And she drops so many truth bombs about Meghan.
But when he stepped back from the statement linked to him and questioned whether it was even real, that changed everything instantly. It created a serious gap and removed what could have been a crucial piece of support. At the same time, there's another explanation being pushed strongly from the other side. The argument is that the information didn't come from any questionable methods at all, but instead from people within Harry's own circle. Friends, acquaintances, and people at the same events often share details with journalists, and that's something that happens regularly in high-profile environments. From the outside, that kind of information can look like it came from tracking or monitoring, which makes it seem more serious. But in reality, it can come down to people simply talking. And what makes this even more interesting is that Harry himself acknowledged this possibility, admitting that he sometimes suspected people close to him could have been the source of certain details. If that explanation is accepted, it makes the claim much harder to prove, because if the information came from willing sources, then the argument that it was obtained through unacceptable methods loses a lot of strength. That's why this part of the case is so important, because it directly impacts the foundation of everything being argued. Another major factor here is that this case isn't about just one article. There are 14 separate pieces being reviewed, and each one has to be looked at individually. That means the outcome doesn't have to go fully one way or the other. It could easily be mixed. There's even talk that the judge could take a balanced approach, reviewing each article on its own and making separate decisions based on the strength of the evidence. In a case this detailed, that kind of outcome wouldn't be surprising at all. But based on how everything has unfolded, many people watching closely feel like things don't look especially strong for Harry right now. Questions around Charlotte Griffith, the situation involving Gavin Burrows, the strong defense from Paul Dacre, and the firm. Denial from Rebecca English have all combined to create a very complicated picture, and this goes beyond just one case. Situations like this don't exist in isolation. Past controversies, major public discussions, and legal reviews have already changed how the press operates and how cases like this are handled today. Those changes brought stricter expectations, clearer boundaries, and stronger legal standards that courts now rely on when dealing with privacy claims. So whatever the final decision is here, it won't just affect the people involved, it could also influence how similar situations are handled in the future. That's exactly why this moment feels so important. It's not just about one legal battle, it's about where the line is drawn between privacy and public interest in a world where that line keeps getting tested again and again. This case was never framed as just something personal, it was positioned as part of a much bigger mission. The idea was that by taking the Daily Mail to court, Harry was pushing for more accountability in how the media operates, especially when it comes to how stories about public figures are gathered and reported. But here's where things take a sharp turn. If the case doesn't succeed, if the judge decides the evidence doesn't support those claims about improper methods, then everything flips fast. Instead of strengthening that message, it could weaken it in a major way. And that changes how the entire situation is viewed. A case like this, high profile, backed by strong legal teams, and stretching over 11 weeks, carries serious weight. And if it doesn't prove what it set out to prove, that sends a strong signal in the opposite direction. That's exactly why so many people have been watching this outcome so closely. This goes beyond just one individual. If the Daily Mail comes out stronger on the key claims, it becomes a major moment in the ongoing relationship between public figures, the media, and the legal system. Not a blanket statement about everything, but a clear result tied to these specific claims and how they were tested in court. Then there's the financial side, and this is where things become very real, very quickly. In UK civil cases, the side that doesn't succeed often has to cover a large portion of the other side's legal costs. And after 11 weeks, those costs are far from small. We're talking about millions in legal fees alone. If Harry ends up responsible for a large share of that, on top of his own expenses, the total could become extremely heavy in a short time. That kind of financial pressure is impossible to ignore. There's also been talk about how those costs could be managed, with speculation around assets and financial flexibility. But the reality is, no one fully knows what's happening behind the scenes. What is clear is that this case has already required a huge investment of time, money, and energy. And if the outcome doesn't go his way, that pressure only grows. That's exactly why many people originally warned about taking this kind of legal route. There's a long-standing understanding that going up against major media organizations comes with serious risks. The process itself can bring private details into the public spotlight, and once that happens, there's no taking it back. Every detail, every message, every moment becomes part of the record, and that exposure can sometimes hit just as hard as the final decision itself. Those warnings didn't come out of nowhere. They came from people who understand how cases like this unfold, how evidence gets challenged, and how unpredictable things can become once everything is under close review. Even with that in mind, Harry still moved forward, clearly confident that the evidence would support his claims. But what followed didn't play out the way many expected, and that's where things started shifting. Moments like the Charlotte Griffith messages coming into focus, the unexpected situation involving Gavin Burrows, the judge stepping in during testimony, and strong reactions from key figures all added layers that couldn't be ignored. Each moment changed the tone, making the case feel more complex with every week. Now none of that decides the final outcome on its own. And that's important to remember. Legal cases can still take unexpected turns at the last moment, and it's possible that some parts succeed while others don't. The Daily Mail may feel confident, but confidence alone doesn't decide a case. Still, one thing stands out clearly. The path this case has taken has been far more complicated than expected. And no matter what the final decision says, the record that's already been built tells its own story. A story shaped by relationships, conflicting testimony, challenges, and everything that played out inside that courtroom. This likely wasn't the version of events Harry expected to dominate the public conversation. But once a case reaches this level of exposure, there's no controlling how it's seen. Every message, every exchange, every reaction becomes part of the narrative, and that narrative grows on its own. Right now, the judge is carefully reviewing everything, and the final decision is getting closer with each passing day. When it arrives, it will officially close this legal chapter. Whether it matches what Harry originally aimed for or moves in a different direction is what everyone is waiting to see. And beyond all the legal arguments, there's a human side here that can't be ignored. This situation didn't start overnight. It's built on years of living under constant public attention, where privacy has always been difficult to maintain. Growing up in that environment leaves a lasting effect. When personal moments, relationships, and everyday situations turn into headlines, it changes how someone views the world. It builds pressure, creates frustration, and drives a strong desire to push back. Those feelings are real, and they carry weight in their own way. The experiences behind them are real too. Even though the court focuses on evidence and legal standards, that human side remains part of the bigger picture that led to this moment. The motivation behind this case is real as well. The push for accountability, the belief that certain lines were crossed, that didn't just come from nowhere. It connects to years of experience and a sense that something needed to change. But here's where things start to feel heavy. There's a clear gap between what was expected and what actually unfolded. The goal was to prove that certain actions crossed legal boundaries and to get clear recognition of that. Instead, the courtroom brought a different kind of spotlight. The focus didn't stay on just one side. His own actions, his credibility, and even private messages from years ago all came into view. That's how cases like this work. It's not just about one argument, it's about examining everything closely. By stepping forward to challenge the press, he also stepped into that same level of scrutiny himself. That's not about bias or imbalance, it's simply how the process works. Once it starts, everything is examined, and nothing stays hidden. This is exactly why many people warn about taking this kind of legal path. Not to protect media organizations, but because they understand how intense and exposing the process can become. It opens doors that can't be closed once information becomes public. Looking at everything that happened, it's clear the case didn't move in the direction many expected at the start. Every argument was tested from multiple angles, and the risks connected to this kind of legal action became more visible with each passing week. Now, the big question is, what happens next? And this is where things get even more important. After 11 weeks of pressure, testimony, and detailed examination, does this experience change anything going forward? Or does the bigger mission continue no matter how this case ends? Recent appearances suggest the broader message is still moving forward, that the focus hasn't disappeared. But at the same time, this specific case is reaching its final stage, and the decision will bring clarity to this chapter. Beyond everything seen publicly, the real decisions will happen privately, away from cameras, away from headlines, in quiet moments where the next steps are carefully considered. Those moments are what truly shape what comes next. There are multiple factors coming together here. The final outcome, the financial impact, the public reaction, and ongoing personal challenges all combine to make the next move extremely important. Right now, the judge is still reviewing every detail carefully before delivering the final decision. Harry is waiting, just like everyone else, for that moment. And when it arrives, it won't just close this chapter. It will set the tone for everything that follows. No matter how it ends, one thing is already clear. This experience has left a real impact. The time, the exposure, the pressure, all of it is now part of a bigger story that can't be undone. Every detail, every moment, every reaction is now out there, shaping how this situation is being seen. The final decision is getting closer, and the tension is rising fast. When it drops, it won't just end this case. It will shape everything that comes next. The legal questions will have answers, but the conversation won't stop there. People will keep analyzing, debating, and forming their own opinions based on everything that happened. In the end, the ruling will come from the judge, but the long-term impact will unfold over time. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think the outcome will be, and was this legal battle worth it in the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you made it this far. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with anyone following the story. I'll catch you in the next one.